Jake Ward pressed his palm against the rough wooden post outside his cabin, but the deep, burning ache in his back wouldn't let go. For 3 days, something had been pushing up under his skin, hard and round like a smooth river stone. He'd had a share of bruises and scars. Any rancher did, but this was different. It pulsed. The early sunlight stretched across the empty plains, casting long shadows over his lonely spread. Jake peeled off his worn shirt, hoping to catch a look in the cracked mirror hanging above his wash basin. His reflection showed an angry red swelling between his shoulder blades, the skin hot to the touch. Whatever was inside him was trying to get out. He knew just one person who might have answers: Martha Whitmore. She'd been patching wounds and curing sickness for folks in these parts for more than 20 years, ever since the only doctor around had left town under suspicious circumstances. Jake saddled his horse slow, every motion sending a sharp sting through his shoulders. The ride to Martha's cabin took him through a narrow canyon where wildflowers grew in stubborn clusters between the rocks. Normally, he might have noticed them. Today, he barely saw the trail. The thing in his back throbbed harder with each heartbeat, demanding his attention. He found Martha behind her little wooden house, hanging laundry on a line. Her hands, weathered from years of work, moved quick and sure. She took one look at his pale face, set down her basket, and simply said, "Show me." Jake turned and lifted his shirt. Her sudden gasp told him everything. This wasn't something she'd seen before. "How long's it been like this?" she asked, her voice somewhere between curiosity and concern. 3 days. It's worse every hour." She moved her hand near the swelling, but didn't touch it. "This isn't a wound trying to heal. Something's been buried in there for a long time. Years, maybe decades." The words hit Jake like a splash of cold water. "Barry, I need to open it," she said, pulling a small leather pouch of tools from the porch table. "But you need to understand, whatever's in there didn't get put there by accident. Someone meant to hide it." The thought made Jake's stomach tighten. As she laid out a scalpel, the lump in his back pulsed harder, like it knew what was coming. Her blade was sharp, but the first cut sent a jolt of white-hot pain through his whole body. He gripped the arms of the chair until his knuckles turned white, sweat running down his face despite the cool morning air. "Hold still," Martha murmured, her voice tight with focus. "I can feel something solid under the tissue." The pain went deeper than any bullet wound Jake had ever known. It was invasive, personal. As she worked, his mind drifted, strange, how he'd never wondered why his earliest memories started around age 7. "There," Martha breathed, pressure released, and something small and hard dropped in her palm. She wiped away the blood, and they both stared at the object. It was a tarnished silver cylinder, no longer than a man's thumb, sealed with wax on both ends. Strange symbols were etched along its surface. "Someone put this in you when you were a baby," Martha said slowly. "The scar tissue tells me you were no older than a year." This was deliberate. Jake took it with trembling fingers. The metal felt warm, as if it had been carrying the heat of his body for decades. "What kind of person would hide something inside a child?" he muttered. "Someone trying to keep it safe," Martha replied. She handed him a thin knife. "Break the seal, if you're sure you want to know." Jake was about to answer when he caught movement outside the window. A lone rider was coming up the trail, a man in a dark coat moving with purpose. "Strange," Jake murmured. "Nobody just stumbles out here." Martha stepped to the window, her expression tightening. "That's Grant Flint. He's been asking questions in town about a man with a scar on his back." Jake felt the weight of the cylinder double in his palm. Grant Flint rode up slow, but everything about him said he was a man who didn't waste movement. He swung down from his horse with the ease of someone who'd been in the saddle most of his life. His coat was dusty but expensive, his boots worn in all the right places. "Morning, folks," he said, tipping his hat. His voice carried that soft, careful drawl of a man who'd spent time back east but wasn't afraid of trouble. "I'm looking for someone," he went on, eyes moving over the cabin, then over Jake, then back again like he was cataloging every detail. "Man might have a mark on his back. Old scar, maybe right between the shoulders." Jake's grip tightened around the cylinder hidden behind his leg. "Don't know anybody like that," Martha said before he could open his mouth. She stepped forward, blocking the doorway, chin tilted in that stubborn way of hers. "You might try the saloon in town." Grant smiled, but it was thin, all teeth, and no warmth. "I think you do." In fact, his gaze slid past her. "I think he's standing right behind you." The silence that followed had weight to it. Jake realized his shirt was still off, the fresh bandage on his back plain as day. "You've been watching me," Jake said quietly. Grant nodded once, like the game was already over. 3 days now. Ever since I saw you favoring that side when you walk. Takes a trained eye to spot something working its way out of scar tissue. Martha's hand drifted toward the rifle leaning by the door, but Grant lifted his palms. "Easy, ma'am. I'm not here to hurt anyone. I'm here because that man," he nodded toward Jake, "is carrying something that belongs to my employer. Something hidden a very long time ago." Jake's stomach turned. "And who's your employer?" "A man who's been looking for a lost document for 23 years, Grant said, his tone tightening just enough to show this wasn't casual talk. "A document that proves certain land claims in this territory are built on lies. If the wrong hands get it, dozens of families lose everything." Martha's eyes narrowed. "And if the right hands get it?" Grant met her stare. "Maybe some of those families get their land back. Maybe a few powerful men lose their grip." Jake felt the metal cylinder burning hot in his palm. "You're saying I've been carrying stolen papers?" "Not stolen," Grant said. "Hidden. By your real father. Before he was murdered." The words came out too smooth, too certain, like he'd been rehearsing them. Jake's jaw tightened. Before he could answer, the faint rumble of hooves carried up the canyon. Martha moved to the window, her voice dropping. "Not just one rider. 6. Grant cursed under his breath. "They followed me." He pulled a revolver from under his coat, checking the cylinder without looking at it. "And if we don't move fast, they'll take that from you and bury it deeper than before." The riders came into view like a dark tide. 6 men in dust-stained coats, faces hidden under wide brims, moving in a half circle around the cabin. The kind of formation men used when they knew exactly what they were doing. "Break it open," Grant told Jake, low and urgent. "Do it now. If those papers get into their hands, your father's death means nothing." Jake hesitated, then used Martha's knife to crack the wax seal. The metal tube gave with a soft snap, revealing a tightly rolled piece of parchment, yellowed but still crisp. Maps, land surveys, legal documents covered in neat script and faded signatures. He didn't know what they meant, but he could tell by the look in Grant's eyes that they meant everything. "That's Marcus Stone out there," Grant said in a voice like gravel. "He's been the consortium's enforcer for 15 years. And he's the one who killed your father." Martha's hands tightened around her rifle as she peered through the window. 6 against 3 isn't odds I care for," she muttered. Grant shook his head. 6 against 2. I'm not the man you think I am." Before either Jake or Martha could react, Grant stepped forward, raising his voice so the riders could hear. "Stone, I found him. The Ward boys got the papers." Jake's pulse spiked. The air between them seemed to crackle. Betrayal hit him hard, knocking the breath out of him. But Grant wasn't moving like a man eager to hand someone over. His steps were slow, almost deliberate, like he was giving them a head start. Martha caught on first. "Back door," she whispered, jerking her head toward the horses tied behind the cabin. But before they could move, Grant's voice rang out again, loud enough to carry across the clearing. "The papers are hidden in the old mine. The boy doesn't have them." Jake froze, the rolled parchment still clutched in his hand. Why would he lie to his own men? Stone's reply came sharp. "You'd better be right, Flint. We've looked too long to be chasing ghosts." Grant pointed toward the canyon. "Half a mile up. Ward family used it for their dirty secrets." Stone barked orders, sending 4 riders off toward the mine. He stayed behind with 1 other gunman, leaving 3 men between them and trouble. When the dust of the departing horses settled, Martha kept her rifle trained on Stone. "What's your game, Flint?" Grant turned slowly, meeting Jake's eyes with something raw beneath the surface. "My real name is Sam Ward, and you're my brother." The words didn't land right away. They hung there, heavy and possible. Jake stared at him, searching his face for proof. The eyes were the same dark shade. The jawline had that same stubborn angle. "Prove it," Jake said, voice low. Stone laughed, shifting his weight his revolver steady on Jake. Family reunions touching. Now hand over those papers, both of you. Sam didn't flinch. You've got a birthmark shaped like a crescent moon on your left ankle. Dad used to say it was a horseshoe turned sideways for good luck. The detail hit Jake like a blow to the ribs. No one knew about that mark. He'd kept it hidden his whole life. Stone's smile faded. Enough talking. Papers. Now. Sam adjusted his hat with his left hand, voice steady. You'll get them. But first, do you remember Dad's last words? Stone's eyes flickered. How would I know that? Because you were close enough to hear them when you pulled the trigger. Sam's hat hit the dirt. That was the signal. Everything happened at once. Sam diving sideways, drawing his gun, Martha's rifle cracking like thunder, the second gunman stumbling back with a cry. Jake threw himself toward the woodpile, just as Stone's shot tore into it, splinters grazing his cheek. Sam's bullet caught Stone in the shoulder, spinning him but not dropping him. Martha racked another round, forcing the wounded gunman into cover. Stone clutched his bleeding arm, shouting, "Burn those papers if you have to, but don't let them get to the government." Sam stepped forward, weapon steady. You killed an innocent man for money. Now you're going to answer for it. Stone barked a bitter laugh. Answer to who? Half the judges in this territory drink from our cup. Hoofbeats pounded in the canyon again. The rest of Stone's riders were on their way back. Martha didn't take her eyes off the gunman, still in the fight. We've got minutes. Trail behind the cabin leads up the ridge. Jake tucked the papers into his shirt, feeling every heartbeat against them. They've been hidden inside him for 23 years. If they died here, they'd mean nothing. Jake could feel the papers crinkle against his chest with every breath, like they had a heartbeat of their own. Sam kept his revolver steady on Stone while edging toward the cabin's back corner, scanning the ridge line like a man who'd learned to live by his awareness. Move, Sam ordered without raising his voice. Martha, you take point. Jake, you stay in the middle. Keep those papers close and don't stop for anything. Martha didn't argue. She moved quick for her age, her boots crunching over dry earth as she led them toward the trail behind the cabin. Jake followed, stealing one last glance over his shoulder at Stone. The man's eyes were full of hate, cold, calculating hate, the kind that didn't fade, even when blood seeped through his shirt. The narrow trail was just a slit cut into the rocky wall, barely wide enough for one person at a time. Martha pressed herself against the cliff as she climbed, her fingers searching for the next hold. Dust puffed under her boots, falling into the canyon below. They'll have to leave their horses, she said between breaths. That'll slow him some. Jake glanced down and saw two of Stone's men already dismounting, their figures small against the canyon floor. Not enough, he muttered. Sam moved behind Jake like a shadow, his gun still out. 2 miles over the ridge, there's an old mining camp, he said. If we reach it, we can signal the next territorial patrol. Jake shot him a look. How do you know when a patrol's coming? Because I've been feeding them intel on the consortium for 3 years, Sam replied without missing a step. I'm a federal marshal. Have been since I turned 18. Jake stopped climbing. The words didn't fit with the man he'd met that morning. You're telling me this whole thing, the papers showing up here, it's all been part of some job? Sam's jaw tightened. It's been part of making sure the people who killed our father don't keep winning. And until I knew those papers were real, I couldn't risk showing my badge. Too many ears in the wrong places. Martha threw a glance back. We can save the family drama for when bullets aren't flying. A shot cracked from below, chipping the rock near Martha's head. Jake felt his stomach lurch. The men were climbing faster than he'd thought. They pushed on, finally reaching a narrow ledge that offered a moment's shelter. Jake pressed his back to the cool stone, the air burning in his lungs. From here, he could see the whole valley, brown ridges rolling toward a distant line of green, the sky stretching forever. For a split second, it almost felt like freedom. Why didn't you just tell me you were my brother? Jake asked quietly, not taking his eyes off the trail below. Sam reloaded one chamber at a time. Because for all I knew, they'd gotten to you. You could have been hiding those papers for them. Or worse, not even known you were part of it. Jake's throat tightened. So you thought I might be one of them? I had to consider every possibility, Sam said. Too much was at stake. Below them, voices echoed up the canyon, men swearing, boots scraping rock. One voice cut through them all, sharp with fury. "Stone, move," Sim said again. "The camp's just ahead." They rounded a bend in the trail, and Jake's pulse spiked. Two riders were coming in from the opposite side, blocking the way. His first thought was that Stone had outflanked them. Then he saw the uniforms, dusty blue coats that caught the sunlight. "Your government patrol?" Jake asked. Sam nodded once, a flash of relief in his eyes. Right on time. By the time they reached the camp, the riders were already dismounting. The man in front was older, with lines cut deep into his face and a look that missed nothing. "Marshal Ward," he called, his voice carrying easy authority. "We got your message. Are these the documents?" Sam nodded toward Jake. "My brother's been carrying them for 23 years. Before Jake could hand them over, Stone's men crested the ridge behind them, panting, guns drawn. But their steps slowed when they saw the blue uniforms. Shooting at federal officers was a noose offense. The older man's voice carried over the wind. "Marcus Stone, you're under arrest for murder, fraud, and conspiracy against the territorial government." Stone stepped forward, bleeding but defiant. "You have no proof of anything." Jake pulled the document from his shirt and held them out. "Here's your proof." The wind tugged at the edges of the parchment as the officer began to read. His frown deepened with each page. "Survey fraud. Forged signatures. False mining claims." He looked up, his expression dark. "This will destroy the consortium." Sam stepped closer, producing a leather case from his coat. "And here's the rest. Bank records, witness statements, copies of land grants." For the first time, Jake saw something like fear on Stone's face. Stone's men began to back away when they saw how much proof was stacked against them. They knew the fight was over, and no amount of bullets could fix it now. The officer, Captain Morrison, nodded to his rangers and then moved in quick, taking the men's guns and tying their hands. Morrison's voice was steady, but there was steel in it. "Marcus Stone, you're also wanted for the murder of Thomas Ward, committed 23 years ago." Stone's face hardened. "You can't prove that." Sam's eyes never left him. "I was 8 years old when you shot our father. I remember every detail. I'll testify." The words seemed to drain the last bit of fight out of Stone. His shoulders sagged. He let his revolver drop to the dirt and raised his hands. As the rangers started leading the prisoners toward the trail, Jake stood there for a moment, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. The throbbing in his back was gone now, replaced by a strange emptiness, like the spot where the cylinder had been was finally free. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now," Sam said, "you get the ranch back. Those forged papers they've been using to claim your land. These documents prove it's yours." Martha stepped closer, resting a hand on Jake's shoulder. Her face was tired, but there was a spark of pride in her eyes. "Your father would be proud. He died trying to make this right. Today, you finish what he started." Jake swallowed hard. He didn't trust his voice to speak, so he just nodded. They started down the narrow trail with the rangers, the sun beginning its slow dip toward the horizon. The wind was cooler now, carrying the scent of pine from the higher slopes. Somewhere far below, a hawk called, its cry echoing through the canyon. For the first time in years, Jake felt like he wasn't walking alone. Sam was just ahead, talking quietly with Morrison about the trip to the capital. Martha followed behind, her rifle slung across her back, scanning the trail like she always did. It hit Jake then, not just that he had his father's land back, but that he had a brother he never knew. Blood he could trust. The climb down wasn't easy. Loose stones slid under their boots, and the trail twisted sharply in places. But with every step, the knot in Jake's chest loosened a little more. By the time they reached the bottom, the prisoners were secured, the evidence was packed, and the rangers were ready to ride. Morrison mounted his horse and looked at the brothers. "We'll get this to the capital within the week. Every false claim will be investigated. The land will go back to its rightful owners." Jake nodded. "Then my father's death wasn't for nothing." "No," Sam said quietly. "It wasn't." As they watched the rangers ride off with Stone and his men, Jake felt the last of the day's sunlight warm his face. The land stretched out in front of him, open, honest, and his again. The fight had been long. The cost had been high. But in the end, the truth had come out. And the truth, no matter how deep it's buried, always finds its way to the light. The trail back toward the ranch was quiet at first, except for the crunch of boots and the distant calls of the rangers as they led Stone's men down the canyon. The air was cooler now, and long shadows stretched over the rocks. Jake found himself walking side by side with Sam, still trying to wrap his head around the truth. "You knew about me this whole time?" Jake asked, his voice low. Sam nodded without looking over. "Not at first. I only had bits and pieces. Stories from folks who remembered a boy being sent to live with an uncle after his parents died. But when I saw you in town a few months back, the way you stood, the eyes, it was like looking at Pa." Jake chewed on that in silence for a moment. "And you didn't say anything because you didn't trust me." Sam's jaw worked like he was choosing his words. "I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But if I was wrong, if you'd been turned, then everything Pa died for would have been lost. Sometimes the truth has to wait until it's safe." Martha, walking just ahead, glanced back over her shoulder. "You two sound like you're trying to make up for 20 years in 10 minutes. "Feels like we are," Jake said. They passed through a patch of wind-blown pine. The needles whispered overhead, and for a moment, it felt like the land itself was listening. Jake looked at the mountains on the horizon, their edges catching the last of the sunlight. He'd grown up staring at those peaks, never knowing they hid so many answers. "You remember him?" Jake asked suddenly. "Pa." Sam's step slowed. "I remember his hands. Big, calloused, but careful when he fixed a saddle or lifted me into the wagon. I remember his laugh, low and quick, like he didn't want to draw attention. And I remember the day they took him from us." His voice roughened, but he didn't stop walking. Stone smiled when he pulled the trigger. "That smile's been burned in my head ever since." Jake swallowed hard, wishing for something to say that wouldn't sound empty. He didn't find it. By the time they reached the open stretch near the ranch, the sky was painted in deep orange and purple. The air smelled of dry grass and dust. Martha stopped and let out a long breath, her eyes fixed on the cabin in the distance. "Been a while since I saw that place without the wrong men laying claim to it." Jake felt a strange ache in his chest. "It's been home, even when it wasn't mine." Sam glanced at him. "It's yours now, but you'll have to decide what to do with it. A ranch this size, with the consortium gone, will draw attention. Not all of it good. I'll manage," Jake said, though he wasn't entirely sure how. They reached the porch as the first stars began to prick through the darkening sky. Jake paused before stepping inside, looking out across the land. It looked the same as it always had, the same fence lines, the same windmill creaking in the breeze, but it felt different now, like the ground had shifted beneath it. Inside, Martha moved with purpose, setting her rifle in the corner and lighting a lamp. The warm glow filled the room, softening the edges of the day. Sam took off his coat, and for the first time since they'd met, Jake saw him without the weight of the chase on his shoulders. He looked younger, somehow. "You staying?" Jake asked. Sam smiled faintly. "For a while. The investigation isn't over, but we've got a little breathing room. And maybe we should figure out how to be brothers before we go chasing more ghosts." Martha set a pot on the stove. "Good. I've had enough running for one day. And the two of you can help with supper. Justice or no justice, a body still needs to eat." Jake chuckled quietly. The sound surprised him. They ate together at the small wooden table, the quiet filled by the creak of chairs and the occasional clink of cutlery. It wasn't a celebration. Too much had been lost for that. But it was something solid. A start. When they were done, Sam leaned back and looked at Jake with a seriousness that made the lamp's flames seem sharper. "What we did today, it's not the end. The men who backed Stone still have money, power, and friends in high places. They'll try to keep what they stole." Jake met his gaze. "Then we don't stop." Sam's mouth curved into the smallest of smiles. "Good. I was hoping you'd say that." Outside, the wind shifted, rattling the loose boards on the porch. It sounded almost like the land was answering back. The next morning came quiet, the kind of stillness that made every small sound feel louder. Jake woke before the sun, the habit of ranch life never having left him. For a moment, he lay there staring at the ceiling beams, listening to the faint creak of the windmill outside and the slow, steady breath of someone else moving around in the kitchen. He pushed himself up, stretching his shoulders. The ache in his back was there, but dull now, more like a reminder than a wound. When he pulled on his shirt, the fabric brushed against the fresh bandage, and he thought about how much had changed in less than 2 days. Martha was already at the stove, stirring something that smelled of coffee and bacon. She glanced over her shoulder. "You look like you slept about as well as I did," she said. Jake gave her a tired smile. "Better than I thought I would." Sam was at the small table, cleaning his revolver in neat, practiced motions. He looked up briefly. "We need to talk about what comes next." Jake poured himself a cup of coffee, the steam curling into the cool morning air. "I figured as much." Sam set down the revolver and leaned forward, elbows on the table. "The Rangers will take the documents to the Capitol. That part's safe. But the men who worked with Stone won't just fade away. Some will want revenge. Others will try to cover their tracks before we can tie them to the fraud." Martha spoke without turning from the stove. "So you're saying trouble's coming?" Sam's gaze stayed on Jake. "It always is. But this time, we'll see it coming." Jake took a sip, the bitter taste grounding him. "And what about us? We've got a ranch to run." A shadow of a smile crossed Sam's face. "I'm not much for fence mending, but I'll stick around long enough to help you get things set. After that, my badge will pull me back to the job." Jake studied him for a long moment. "You're good at it, aren't you? The job, I mean." "It's what I know," Sam said simply. They ate breakfast without hurry. The light outside shifted from gray to gold, spilling over the fields. Jake couldn't help watching it, the way the land caught the sun like it was meant to be seen this way. His father had worked this ground, bled for it, died for it, and for the first time, it felt like it was truly theirs again. After the meal, Jake stepped out onto the porch. The air was crisp, smelling faintly of dust and sage. The fences needed mending. The corral gate sagged a little. Life had to go on, even after the kind of storm they just walked through. Sam joined him, standing with his hands resting on the porch railing. For a moment, they just looked out across the open land. "You know," Sam said quietly, "Pa used to tell me something when we were working in the fields. Said you can't always choose the fights that come to you, but you can choose how you stand in them." Jake's throat tightened. "Guess we stood all right this time." Sam gave him a sidelong glance. "We did more than that. We made sure the truth got out. That matters, Jake, even when it costs." They stood there until Martha's voice called from inside, reminding them there was still work to be done. Jake stepped off the porch first, the boards creaking under his boots, and walked toward the barn. Sam followed. It wasn't the same life Jake had woken up to yesterday, but it was his, and with his brother beside him, he figured it might just be stronger than before. That evening, the sky burned deep orange over the ridge, fading to purple where the first stars began to appear. The day had been full, fixing fence lines, checking the water troughs, repairing the sagging corral gate. But it wasn't the work that weighed on Jake. It was the quiet, the kind that comes after the danger has passed, when a noise in your head finally slows and you start to feel what the fight cost you. Martha was inside, humming low as she cleaned up from supper. Sam sat on the porch steps, sharpening a knife, the slow scrape of steel on stone a steady rhythm in the cooling air. Jake leaned against the porch railing, looking out over the land. The grass moved in waves under the breeze, and the windmill turned with its familiar groan. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a guest here. This was his land, his father's land, and now the truth of it was carved into paper and signed by law. "You thinking about him?" Sam asked without looking up. Jake nodded. "All day. Not just how he died, but what he stood for. I never understood it before. Why someone would risk everything for a bunch of papers." Sam set the knife down and met his brother's eyes. It wasn't about the papers. It was about what they protected. Land, yes, but also the people on it. The right to work it, to live on it, to pass it down without someone with money and power deciding they could take it. Jake thought about that for a long moment. "Guess that's why you didn't stop chasing them." "That's why I'll never stop," Sam said. "Truth doesn't matter if it stays buried. It only matters when someone's willing to drag it into the light, no matter the cost." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of pine from the ridge. Jake closed his eyes and let it wash over him. He said, Pa used to tell me a man's worth isn't in how much he owns, but in what he's willing to protect. I didn't get it then. I think I do now. Sam's smile was small but real. Then maybe we both learned something. Martha stepped out, dried her hands on a cloth. She stood beside them, following their gaze out to the fading light. Your father would be proud, she said softly. The three of them stood together as the sun dropped below the horizon, the land around them settling into night. Jake felt the weight in his chest ease. The fight wasn't over. Not for the land, not for the truth, but they had won this round. And in winning it, they'd gained more than ground or paper. They'd reclaimed a name, a family, and a piece of honor that no one could forge or steal. Some truths take years to find their way back. Some are hidden so deep you don't even know you're carrying them. But when they surface, you understand. They were never meant to be forgotten. And as Jake looked out over the darkening fields, he knew that the only thing worth more than keeping what's yours is keeping it honest.